Okay, guys, so a very warm welcome to every one of you. The recording has just started, and I'm going to start sharing my screen for the presentation to begin. I hope it's going well. I think everybody can see my screen right now. So anyway, guys, today we're going to have a presentation on the subject of what bots and stakeholders think of each other. I think I want to say a little bit more the stakeholders because I think it's up for discussion to what extent bots can think. But let's focus on the stakeholders for now. So I will do my presentation. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. Some of them might even be answered during my presentation. And after the presentation, we have enough time to discuss your questions and start a little discussion on the topic as well. So feel free to keep asking everything that you want to know, and I'll get back to you guys. For now, welcome. I'm your host for today. My name is Gabriëlla Martijn, and I am a PhD candidate at Utrecht University. This is the research team I'm part of. I'm currently researching, and I'm also teaching the master students at the university. And our whole research team is focused on conversational AI. So basically, our focus lies on the topic of personalized customer service chatbots. And although my expertise lies a little bit more on the conversational and experimental side of it, we also have colleagues that focus more on the computational and the design side of the conversational AI. And together we test, design, and evaluate the use of said AI. So what I mean with AI, of course, it's a very broad topic, but we mainly focus on task-based, intent-based dialogue systems for customer contact. In other words, customers enter the chat asking something, and the chatbot should try to understand that, natural language understanding, and to that the chatbot should reply, so natural language generation as well. That's what we're going to talk about today. Customer service chatbots and a collaboration between the stakeholders and the chatbots. What do they think about it, and how can we improve it? Okay, let's state some facts. I don't think it's very new to all of you, but I'm still going to state them anyway. So when we look at the beginning of 2020, the use of chatbot and actually whole AI use has increased with 88%. This is obviously due to the fact that COVID-19 hit the world, but also due to the fact of the coming with ChatGPT and other large language models. So facts show, research shows that by the end of 2023, 55% of the customers, not here, but worldwide, will have used a self-service chatbot at some point in their customer journey. So that's a huge amount of people. And looking at those numbers, we can actually say that 88% of the customers think that a good customer service makes them more likely to purchase again, but also view the brand or the company as a better company overall. So they might prefer, let me just say a random word, prefer a Zara with a good chatbot over another company that sells clothes. But it has to be stated that over 2/3 of customers won't use a company chatbot again after just one negative experience. So I hope that also states the seriousness of focusing on providing these customers with the right customer service, also due via your chatbot channel. Okay, I saw some of you guys questions when registration popped up for this webinar already, but with the coming of Gen AI, it's not all just a utopian world, you know, some problems arise as well. And using generative AI for customer service, I could say it's not completely viable yet. What do I mean with that? Well, of course, if you let loose your generative AI on large data sets, it can make sense and generate new information. But if you don't use the necessary rules, or you don't have a lot of extensive training on the model, it might present hallucinations, or it may even present your customers with fictitious information. Therefore, it's very great to start with it, but keep in mind it needs a lot of training. So it's not a short-term solution. There are some possible logic and reasoning errors if not provided with the right training. And also, if you look at the original, I'm going to just say it, original intent-based chatbots, whom exactly do how you presented your dialogue and they just save the chat, for instance, we can view the type of generative AI a bit more as a black box. So there could be some potential security issues when fed your customer information, because if you don't provide it with the right rules, what information does it save? And is it according to the GDPR or according to privacy law of your own country? Those are things to think about. So even though Gen AI is very upcoming, what we still see is that a lot of companies choose to be safe and still use intent-based dialogue chatbots for customer service. Well, looking back at the customer side, Salesforce performed research as well on the topic, and customers really stress the importance of knowing if it's important if they're either communicating with an AI or a human. And as some of you might know, the GDPR is also extending their law regarding ethics in AI. And one of their statements is that it should always be clear to the customer or to any user if they are either communicating with AI or with the human. So customers think it's important, but according to law, it is important as well. But 80% of the customers also say, like, it's very important for us if a human still validates the output of the AI. So as you can see, even though you want to start with servicing your customers, you still need the human agents to work side by side to the AI as well. Well, looking at the very bottom side of this figure, we see that just 37% of all customers say that they trust AI to be as accurate as a human. Well, let's go and look more into this topic. Some of you might have read it, but Business Insider published an article on AI in customer service gone wrong. So basically, I'm showing two examples of what happened. And there is in the United States, there's a company for the Chevrolet cars dealership, and they launched their ChatGPT powered customer service chatbot. And if you look at the first example, one of the pranksters, they asked actually for the customer service chatbot to write them a Python code. And even though it's very cool that your customer chatbot can do that, it's not basically the goal for that you intended it to. It's not the intended purpose of the chatbot. So that is one example of that your AI really needs confinement and boundaries. The second example says something. Sorry, guys, it's my kind of humor because it's so dry. They talked about selling a car of $1, and of course it wasn't a legitimate deal. But it also shows the importance that even though AI is very promising applications, we still need to ensure responsible and effective use of them in customer service settings. I really like these two examples because it's just, it's a very, very well example of an untrained computer that goes wrong. Okay. So like I said, a lot of customer services still tend to use the original intent-based dialogue systems. But even looking at those systems, problems still arise. If we look at the customer side, 61% of all customers would rather use a self-service for simple issues. So they do actually think that chatbots are great of use within customer services. But like I said earlier, 86% wouldn't even want to use a company's chatbot again after just one negative experience. And if we look at the different generations, okay, we see that like baby boomers are the generation that would prefer actual human contact above the chatbot contact. But for the rest, these generations are quite similar as to how they perceive what they want, but also regarding their not wanting to contact the company's chatbot ever again. So what we see is that even the use of intent-based chatbot has some limitations. As we might all know, it doesn't understand all of our questions. For instance, we ask 3 questions in one sentence. If I were to be your customer service representative, human agent, let me just focus on that word, then I would probably have would have no issues at all in answering those 3 questions. But if you would ask the chatbot the same 3 questions in one sentence, it would have some problem-solving capabilities because it will only answer the first question. Well, these models also take a lot of training because if you start to use a chatbot, you need to know, okay, but what are my customers' questions regarding? Like, do we have maybe seasonality-based questions or promotion-based questions? And what questions do we use in a chatbot and what do the human agents need to handle? We also struggle with the fact that chatbots still sound impersonal. Like, it's very difficult to equip the chatbot with the right sentiment, for instance. Okay, we have a tone of voice, but how would you implement a sentiment? That's still a topic that has a lot of discussion. What we also see is that stakeholders expect chatbots to be very fast and short-term solutions. That being said, what I see in my line of work of research regarding customer service chatbots is that I've done a lot of studies on chatbots, and if I do like a study in August and I try to find the chatbot in October, some of these chatbots are even taken offline between those spread of months because it's not effective or they got bad feedback. So we see that a lot of companies tend to put their chatbot online very fast without regarding if it's fully functioning or not. Well, what we see is basically the trend of the use of AI is increasing, but also the trust gap is widening. The increased use of AI leads to customers stressing the importance of a human touch. Okay, so let's go further into this topic. What we see is that companies offer the solution, or they say like, okay, for now, the best solution is to make these chatbots collaborate with the human agent. In other words, the term human bot teams or humbots. And those are teams in which the chatbot constitutes the initial service contact point and customers are redirected to human agents if the chatbot is unable to help. Well, looking at these teams, we have several parties involved. In other words, several stakeholders, namely the managers, or you could say also the product owners, managers, conversational designers, and the human agents. And those are the stakeholders we're going to talk about today. Okay, looking at a lot of research, there has been an extensive research done on different topics regarding chatbots. If we zoom out on a macro level, there's been a lot of research on how to implement the chatbot in the right way within a company. So what do we need for effective implementation? What we see is that companies implement the chatbot as a gatekeeper, the frontline initial contact point, or as a supplementary channel. Think about deploying the chatbot as, for instance, an FAQ bot or a website navigation help. What we also see is that looking at chatbot evaluation, and I will focus more on this topic later in my presentation, is that companies tend to evaluate on the successful problem resolution, the improvement of their traffic, and of course, the positive feedback that they hope to receive from their customers. If we look at the micro level, if we zoom in a lot, we see that there has been a lot of research on the handover collaboration. In other words, the moment the chat is being transferred from the chatbot to the human agent. According to research, an effective handover is one in which the chatbot conveys useful information. So the relevance of the conversation prior to the handover. But also the speed is very important. For instance, if the chatbot transfers the conversation and the customers are very happy that they got to speak to the chatbot immediately, but the waiting times between the chatbot and the human agent are like 6 minutes. There's no fast availability and their satisfaction might decrease. But what we miss here, we have the very high over level, implementation / evaluation, the micro level, the handover, how do we have an effective handover, etc. But we miss some sort of a middle level. What do I mean with that? Of course, the stakeholders and the collaboration between the chatbot and the people that are responsible for the customer service. So what we looked at in the study I did is how do managers, conversational designers, and human agents evaluate at collaboration? But also, how can we improve it according to the stakeholders? Okay. So what did I do? I conducted a research and I conducted semi-structured interviews with 12 companies in the Netherlands. We focused for this specific study on Dutch companies, and I'll tell you why, because the law regarding privacy concerns and everything, it does differ a bit within and outside of the EU and also within these companies. So that's why we focus on Dutch companies. But because since it was some sort of explorative study to see how the stakeholders view, perceive, and evaluate, we did not confine to one certain branch, but we interviewed companies for over 12 branches as well. So before we dive into the results, it would be nice to do a short little poll to see how you guys are thinking about a certain question. So I would like for you guys to do the poll right now. And I think my host from CDI will show you guys the poll. So I would like to take a few minutes to give everyone the possibility to enter the poll. Carla is saying she cannot see the poll. I think it's raised right now. So the question is, when considering a conversational AI project, what is your top priority? And I see various answers right now: improving customer experience, reducing operational costs, gaining competitive advantage. I like how you guys think. 73%, 74% is focused on customer experience, but of course, we also like to reduce the costs. Okay, let's take a few more seconds and then we can conclude the poll. Okay. So basically what I see is that most of you guys would like to improve the customer experience. And 20% also thinks that reducing operational costs is very important. And 4% says it's important to enhance employee productivity, and 2% wants to gain competitive advantage. So let's talk a little bit about this after the rest of my presentation, because I'm very interested to see what motivates you to choose a certain answer. Okay, let's continue. So after conducting my interview study, we looked at how managers evaluate the collaboration, and we saw the certain pattern. We saw that to them, cost reduction is very important. And basically what they're saying is that chatbot implementation should lead to cost reduction. Something that is very important to them, let me see, is the word containment. It might be new for you guys, it might not, for some of the managers that are in the chat today. But containment is basically looking at the amount of chats that are not handed over to the human agent. So in other words, how well does the chatbot prevent handovers? And they view the chatbot as an initial gatekeeper. In other words, the chatbot is their first initial contact point, and it should kind of keep the gate for the customer to not feel pressured to go into another channel. So they also say, like, looking at customer satisfaction, for us, it's very important that the chatbot is a self-service tool in the digital customer journey and also supports them. So they don't need to pick up the phone, but they should just be able to keep in the chat. Okay, so those two are the main points on how they perceive the collaboration between humans and bots. It should lead to cost reduction. it should enhance customer satisfaction. But how do they evaluate those conversations then? So how will they keep track if it does reduce costs? And if the chatbot increases customer satisfaction? Well, I think, and it's an ongoing discussion. So we have our very old school star ratings. That being said, you have the conversation and then you have the 5 stars and you have to enter, okay, how many stars do you rate this conversation? We also have the highly known evaluation question, were you assisted well? But what I did come across is that a lot of managers were struggling, like if we have a handover conversation, so prior to the handover, we have the chatbot versus the customer, and then we have it transferred to the human agent. They struggle with, how do we evaluate the first part? So now they're evaluating the entire conversation, but how do we split it up between the part where the customer only talked to the chatbot? So that's something they still are struggling with a bit. So I would love to know how you guys do it at your companies or what your ideas are on that. And maybe there are metrics right now that when I did the study were not available or we didn't know about yet. So that would be nice to talk about later. Anyway, they also look at the handover rate. So how many conversations are handed over as compared to the complete conversations we had in chat that day or that month. They also look at the resolution rate. So to what rate, to what extent did the chatbot have a resolution to the customer queries? And something that a lot of companies also do, but it requires a lot of manual work. Maybe now not anymore with the coming of Gen AI. Maybe we could put some model on that, is to see especially what the drop-off rate is. So basically we have a specific customer question with an intent, and the intent is on a specific topic. And is there a larger drop-off rate where the customer leaves the chat very early, so not to the entire, not that the conversation is ended, but it leaves it early? Is that bigger on, does it happen more often on a certain topic or not? So those are things they focus on. But looking forward, let me see if my slide continues as well. Yeah. So managers are always struggling with, how can we use the chatbot best for containment, for cost reduction, but also how can we use it best as a tool or as a means for the human agents to do their job even better? So they say, like, using the chatbot as a work preparator, it does save the employee as part of their conversation. You know, that is in terms very cost effective because the conversation time that the employee has looking at if a chatbot is deployed or not should be shorter because the chatbot has asked some preparatory questions. But the dilemma still is, like I said earlier, we have, for instance, a fast chatbot response. We don't have a maximum number of chats that the chatbot can handle at the same time. For instance, the chatbot handles 20 conversations. We have 3 human agents, and every human agent is able to answer 3 chats at the same time. Well, if 16 of these chats need a handover, and we only have like 9 available slots, there still is a large waiting time until they're done with the conversation. So they do see that it's still a little bit of an improvement to make. Like, how do we perfectly align our human team to the speed of the chatbot, and how do we make sure that it's still cost effective that way? Because a slow human response would lead to a decrease in customer satisfaction. Well, research shows, and also talking to a lot of companies, they do advise to give the customer some ideas on when the off-peak hours are. So for instance, hey, it's very busy right now on chat. You should come back between 4 and 5. Just top of my mind. It's not always off-peak between those hours, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so that was the first part, the managers. Let's look at the conversational designers, aka the builders of the dialogues. Well, they don't say that cost reduction is their main evaluation criteria, but they actually view the human agents as their customers, and they also view the customers from the company, customer service customers, as their customers. They say, like, our colleagues, the managers, they really try to realize cost reduction, but sometimes they feel a little bit of a struggle with that because they're in opposition of each other, as they really focus on customer satisfaction. And they think that more people within the company should focus on that, because if you're building a very effective chatbot, it will cost you in the beginning. It will pay off in a later stage, but it will cost you in the beginning. So they say, customer satisfaction to us is to what extent do customers receive and answer to their requests. And they also try to support the human agents in the best possible way. Like the chatbot is the initial gatekeeper, and it should be a means to support the human agents and not the objective as gatekeeping, So they say we try to unburden the staff as much as possible. But they still struggle with the fact that in some ways the technology is still lacking. Let's look into that a little bit more. So, like I said earlier, that there is a big disadvantage when you look at the chatbot versus a human agent, because chatbots cannot flexible switch from one question to the other. If you ask 3 questions, it will focus on the first question and the intent of your first question. And with the original intent dialogue-based chatbots, solving that technically is still quite difficult. So that is one of their challenges. Another one of their challenges is really that you cannot really tailor your communication to the type of customer, because as a human, you can make an estimate. I'm talking to an elderly person or a younger person, and you can provide them with a certain tone of voice or sentiment of making jokes or not. And as a chatbot, it's very difficult to tailor the right response, including sentiment and humor, to the right customer, because it can go really, a lot of companies just want to stay off this topic because it can really backfire. Finally, they say, and I will give you some examples, not all human agents read the chat that has been transferred. So they actually try to focus and making the chatbot as a good tool, the best tool as possible for helping the human agents. But if the human agents don't read back what has been said to the chatbot, the collaboration is not the symbiotic relationship that we want. It's mainly the human agents asking questions again, and that's not cost reductive. Let me focus on that a little bit, taking a small sidetrack. So next to the interview study, I also conducted a corpus study. We got real life conversations over a period of a year. I think we got over 2,000 or even more conversations from a real life customer service. And I analyze those conversations. What you basically see is, looking at the triangle, you have the customer question in the top, the initial customer question. It's very specific because you have a topic and you have what the customer wants to do with the topic. But the chatbot, what it does, it even tries to generalize. So you go from a very specific question to more generalization, because you need to know, can I assist this customer? And what you then see is the handover starts, and the very generalized topic is handed over to the customer service representative, the human agent, which then has to specify the topic again. And their goal is, how can I help this customer most quickly? So if that collaboration doesn't work effectively, this is what you'll get. Here we see a mock-up. It's an actual conversation, but I rewrote it a little bit because I didn't want to show the original conversation. So, hi, I'm the chatbot from company X. Please use the buttons that I'll show you. In line 4, you'll see that the customer says, I want to increase my savings account. For me, I'm not entirely sure what he's saying, but it's a savings account, that's a topic, and he wants to do something with it. While the chatbot, we know it's savings account, wants to do something with, he generalizes, hey, I'm showing you buttons, savings account, something else, something else. So the customer, being here specifically with this question, goes here, savings account. And the chatbot then generalizes again, what is your question regarding savings account? Well, didn't I say that in line 4? Yeah, he shows buttons again, and only for the chatbot to realize, hey, I cannot help you with that. And he transfers it to a colleague. So this is the conversation prior. Let's look at the human agent part. Welcome, how can I assist you? Wait, dear sir, didn't I say like here in line 4, line 7, line 9, what I wanted? Well, the customer is actually not even irritated. He's very friendly, but I have seen conversations in which the customer is like, didn't you read it? And he tells it again, like, how can I adjust the limit of my savings account? Well, looking at line 19, that is what the human agent could have started with in the first place. Then we didn't need 16, 17, and 18. Just like, hey, I read your conversation back. What do you exactly mean with this? Da da da. And then the customer would have answered immediately. But here in line 20, the answer is, and the human agent can answer the question. So this is what I mean. We can have a collaboration, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every type of collaboration is most effective. What we see here, this is not the most effective way. And sadly, I've seen numerous of these conversations, and actually this is one of the better ones in which the customer remains just positive and answers the question instead of saying, why didn't you read back? So this is definitely something that could be improved. What Conversationals plead for is, okay, please don't focus on containment and just give the clients, the customers a handover when needed. Like use the chatbot as first line of defense. Give the users a warm welcome, the customers, host them, see what their question is. And if not possible, just hand them over. Like I said, their dilemma is they really try to prepare the chatbot for the handover by asking the right questions. So the customer service representative doesn't have to ask the questions. But if they don't read it, the intended purpose is ignored and they still ask the same questions. So they would really try to say like, hey, we should work together with the human agents. Like human agents, what type of questions do you need the chatbot being asked for you to assist you in your job? On the other side, give them a heads up, like this is what we are here for, the chatbots. This is how you can use us. And maybe, if possible, if you have the right API or whatever, put some type of generative AI on it and let it summarize your chat for you. That's a possibility on how to use this Gen AI for chat right now. So that could be a possible solution. Finally, the human agents. Well, the human agents, they view the Humbot collaboration as something, well, I only encounter the chatbot if there is a handover. So to them, work enjoyment is very important. Like, how does the chatbot assist us in our job, that we can work on actual things and helping actual customer questions that are more like based on our expertise than having to figure out what they need. They really say that's what the chatbot should be for, therefore. And they also say, like, to us, evaluating is based on if we have a decrease in pressure and traffic. We do see that a lot. Like, for instance, if there's a technical difficulty at some point and the chatbot informs the customers, the human agents chat is not filled up so quickly anymore. So that's very positive, and that's how they view the collaboration. Please help us in our job, make it more enjoyable so we can be more expertised and do the things that we want to be there for in the customer journey. And please help us decrease the pressure and traffic. Okay, so they also say, like, evaluating, we have some points that are that we should work on. So what we see with a lot of companies, and that's still the dilemma, like when do we do it or not? In comparison to email, telephone, or social accounts, they create a log automatically. So if you focus on the customer service and a customer enters an email or calls you, there's a log being created in their customer file. But if you just talk with the chatbot regarding a case, and no human agent comes into the chat, there's no automatic log that is created. So you will get these situations in which the customer will refer to a conversation they had with the chatbot and the human agent who doesn't know what it was about. So that's what they do still struggle with. But then the question is, do you want to keep track of all your chats? When do you and when do you not, etc. They also say asynchronous chat, so that is that the chat actually puts works via cookies on your computer. So you can close the app or the browser and you come back and then the chat is still there. If it's not there, it can cause irritation. For me, myself, I actually had some contact with a company regarding a personal question, and somewhat my telephone just switched off and I had to go through the whole process again and my chat wasn't saved. So it really causes irritation at times. But some companies do use it, and that's very nice for the customers, but also for the human agents. They also say, and we see a lot of companies in the Netherlands that are trying out further backend integration, and human agents are really excited about that, because they say if we do use backend integration, the chatbot can take more of half of our conversations, because it's just the potential of our time, a waste of our time if we do keep answering these simple questions. Think about an address change, or hey, I cannot log into my file, whatever. If you do have some sort of backend integration, the chatbot could already open that customer file, and then the human agent could help faster, But what do we see is that there is a big dilemma looking at all the managers as to privacy concerns, like what customer data should or should we not process, etc. Let's go and look into that a little bit more. So I talked to a lot of people, and how do we do the GDPR-proof backend integration? So there are a few points, like async chat if possible, and if it's something that your company could benefit of, just make sure it's being more user-friendly and have cookie-safe conversations. Why would it be more GDPR-proof? If it doesn't contain personal information, it does comply with the fact that you can always look back what you talked about with the chatbot. So for the user, that is very friendly. For the customer, and they always have proof of their conversations. If you do have backend integration, but you don't know, like, how should I process the information within the chat, it's nice to place it behind the login wall. Place your chat channel behind the login wall to ensure the customer's privacy, and so they don't need to log in. Or what you could also do is just ask them to log in via the chat and then have some sort of redirect so they can come back into the chat when logged in. API link the chat to your CRM, so it doesn't process the customer information, but it will retrieve it for your human agents. And if possible, or if applicable, just always inform customers regarding the use of their personal data and what to or what not to disclose via the chat. So, how can we use generative AI? For now, well, you could use it to generate response ideas instead of using templates, meaning if we're not at that point that we can let generative AI loose on our data and we still are having a lot of privacy concerns, it can help your employee to generate response ideas. Look, for instance, if you chat via WhatsApp with one of your friends, and it will give you ideas on, hey, did you want to say good morning, la, la, la? And you can just enter that and you're fast and whatever. You can use it that way as well. You can use it as a conversation starter. Like, okay, this is my general idea. Maybe say like, employ it with rules. If it's summer, this is how I want to start a conversation. Or if there's a promotion, this or that. Or use it as a post-handover conversation summarizer. So those are ways that you can implement it without having these privacy concerns or without having to do extensive training for now, if you'd like. Let me see. I have a question, but I will come back to that. So basically, my summary would be a united perspective of the stakeholders equals a better collaboration with the chatbot, and a better collaboration equals a better customer experience. So the main takeaway points are, we still see that chatbots, being it intent-based, dialogue-based systems or generative AI, we're definitely not there for them to operate completely independently. And we still see the necessity of the collaboration between human agents and the chatbots. We also see that the stakeholders have very different views on how we should evaluate these systems and how we should improve it. So it's very important that if you want to enhance it, that we work together on that point. And what we still see is what we could call an island structure. We have the C-suite, we have the conversational designers on a specific little island, we have the customer service on a specific little island, and they do work together a little bit. But then here you have the managers, here you have the product owner, and they're still very on their island a lot, and we want to see them collaborating more. Don't focus on KPIs, but focus on the user experience, customer experience. And please don't use it as a short-term solution. Just focus on how can we assist my customers, your customers. And I would like to end with a question like, how can you lend your customers and employees a helping hand? Thank you so much. This was the presentation. Let's see if we have any questions. I have a Q&A. Let me see. So Dustin says, is using a login rule considered a best practice? Any data on user preference? So it very much depends on the type of company that you're having. It could be considered a best practice if you have a company that has a very extensive CRM system and that has a lot of client files and databases and returning customers. But if you are, for instance, not a retailer, but you are the producer of, let me say, you're the producer of washing machines, you don't have the client data that the retailer has. So in that case, it would not be the best practice. Is there any data on user preference? I would say there is data on if the user is well informed or not. For instance, looking at municipality chatbots, we did a research on that, and some users, they actually prefer the company stating which data is being used and how, and if they log in or not. But it can also form some type of, that they're actually more afraid because they're like, they're doing something with data, and how do they do that? So it really depends on your company, what data you use, and how extensive your customer database is. Let me see. When bots ask for name and email, does that don't solve the problem of the log somehow, or even create it automatically a log when the user types her name and address? So that could be a thing, but then you have also the part of backend integration. If you type your name and email, if you don't have any backend integration, how will it save it in your customer file? So it depends. It could work, but in other cases, would it work? Let me see. Does the chatbot banner have a cookie consent banner popped up when the user for it is? Yes. So in the case that we have asynchronous chat, you do have a consent banner that pops up, so you can comply with the data. Yes. Okay, so Juliana has another question, and it says, do you have to happen any information on customer satisfaction and manager satisfaction with different types of chatbots? I think she means interfaces. Okay, so she says, Gen AI is really new, but bots that work purely with buttons have existed for much longer. Okay, so we actually conducted research on this topic as well. And we conducted research on interfaces that were button-based, open text-based, and actually had both. And however, if you ask, we did actually a user study. So we asked them, what is your preference? Then we made them do a certain task, and then they had to see what they like best. And interestingly is that people are often like, hey, we want open text because then we can just type. But after the task, a lot of users were like, hey, but now I felt a little bit like, how do I formulate my message? And they were actually taken aback. And out of our user study came that people would actually love a combination of open text and buttons. So give them the opportunity to type, to choose within the first conversation, like, hey, this is the topics that the chatbot can talk about. Let them type an open text. And if the bot is not certain, please give them buttons again. And that's what they had the preference for. Let me look at the chat because I see a lot of questions here as well, and I don't know if I if I answered. In spite of all of those flaws, yeah. What do you expect looking for the future job-wise? Okay. Are humans losing jobs? Okay, so looking at the future, this is a question I actually talked about extensively with Hans van Dam as well, being that he has a company in conversational design. So if you look at the conversational designers for the future, people are extensively asking like, hey, that's your job, like what are they gonna do? What we see is that the basis we have for now, so how we train those chatbots, how we make those dialogues, it will remain because, like I said, not because we have generative AI, doesn't mean we can just let it loose. We still need someone to train these models, to give them like instructions for what type of tone of voice, what rules. And I'm not talking about only the programming side, but also the communicative side. So the future of conversational design will definitely keep, but it will shift from designing conversations to more of a structured conversations. I hope it does make sense a little bit. And will humans be losing their jobs? That's a very good question as well. I've talked about a lot of people regarding this question. And what we basically see is how they view it is that for now, and I'm talking to the next 5 years, I cannot look in the future in 20 or 10 years, but they will see that human agents, their job will transform. So for instance, let me give you an example of, I used to work very long ago as a financial advisor, and we had people standing in the bank halls helping with daily questions, and we had personal bankers. Because of everything digitalized, my job actually shifted. My friend had the same job as me to personal banking. So actually everyone that was standing in the bank hall, their job shifted from being more generalized to more specified. So customer service will still remain, but the job will switch from the chatbot or the generative AI bot being more general, and the human agent's job will be more extensively specialized in a certain topic. So we will have way more specialized people over there. That's how I see it. Let me see. Juliana, yeah, I will see to it. I will have contact with Nursena about this question. Let me see if I have another Q&A. Do we have any other questions that I didn't see? Please, if I did overlook something, tell me, because that is not what I wanted to happen. Eugenio, my research is being published right now at a journal. I don't know the exact date of publishing. I will share it if it's available on my LinkedIn, and the slides will be shared as well. I will also put the team website in here. So we have a team website and we keep it posted regarding our research. So you can always look at that website as well. And if we don't have any problems, let me see. They will share, CDI will share the recording of this, and they will also share the link in the post-marketing mail. So that's great. I think we did every questions that everybody had. If there are any more questions, let me know. And if not, I think we can conclude the meeting. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Yes, you can definitely get the slide for the presentation. Thanks so much and have a great evening, everyone.